So as anti-genocide movements and pro-Palestinian uprisings continue to surge across the world, hundreds of Jews and rabbis were arrested at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Joining me now is one such retired rabbi, community organizer, activist, and a great personal influence on my journey to the left when we organized together on the Bernie campaign. Please welcome to the program, David Mivasair. David, it's great to have you.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Why is it important for Jews to participate in this movement? What's happening, and why are you involved?
All right, thank you. I appreciate the questions. I have two quick answers. Why is it important for Jews to participate? Mainly, I'd say because the problem is especially caused by Jews. That doesn't mean that all Jews are responsible or guilty, but what it does mean is that we have a kind of access and we have a kind of voice to influence how things go, and we need to use it, so we need to counter the very false narrative that these atrocities are being done on behalf of the Jews. We need to stand up and say that, right? We have access to our own families, to organizations that are made up of Jews that push for these atrocities and protect them, So you asked why me? And I feel a very deep, strong moral responsibility to speak up as a Jew, as a rabbi. And for me in particular, I lived in Israel for 4 years. My son was born there. During years of my life, I encouraged Jews to build a relationship with Israel. I even kind of sent some people there, hooked people up with Israeli organizations. I did that so much for years. And it took me years and years to figure out, wait a minute, it's not what we think it is. And we need actually to pivot 180 degrees. And I feel like in some ways I'm paying off my own personal karma, but in a much bigger way. I'll just repeat what I said at the beginning. We, as Jews, have more, or maybe a different kind of potential to impact the entire dynamic of what's going on. And I think if we have the possibility of doing that, we have a responsibility to try to do it. So that's my answer.
There's this attempt by the West to connect Israel to the Jewish identity. And I think that's a big part of why this is so important as well. And
absolutely.
And
when you say an attempt by the West, it's what Zionism does.
Yeah, and we reject that.
The large legacy Jewish organizations in Canada do that all the time. Almost every synagogue, in the front of the synagogue, on like the altar where you lead the prayers from and where you read the Torah from, there's an Israeli flag, right? Any Jewish person that walks into a synagogue to try to somehow deepen their connection with God or whatever draws them into the synagogue, they literally pray toward an Israeli flag. There's no good reason for that, but that almost universal synagogue. It didn't used to be that way. It wasn't like that when I was growing up.
What do you think is causing this sort of like almost like a hyper nationalization? Do you think it's the way I see it is the United States needs a friendly nation state to project their military and imperial power, and they empower a lot of, and so like that's why Israel just gets so much of this aid. Israel has, universal health care for their own citizens while denying it to the Palestinians. This is a country, we were talking about this earlier in today's stream. Biden is in charge of a country with no health care. They're asking for $100 billion in military aid for Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine. And it's just like, I think it's an incumbent on all of us to push back and resist this. And I just want to thank you. I think what you're doing is incredible work. I've worked with you before. And and so here you are. I have up on display on the stream a picture of you on
Hold
the.
on a second. Just hold on,
No
because
problem.
you asked a question. I'd like to
Oh,
respond to,
sure.
or maybe you didn't ask a question. You said what you think. So I want to add, you said something like the U.S. needs an ally in the Middle East to support it militarily and so on. I agree with that. But I also want to say it's completely irrational for the US to choose Israel as that ally, and in doing so, to alienate and enrage the entire Arab and Muslim world. So I don't think that's an adequate explanation. And people in the State Department in the 1940s and 1950s didn't think that was a good approach. So you need to take into account other factors. So I think I'll say a few things. I think the Zionists have been able to play their cards and draw support in the United States. You see that. Same thing in Canada, of course. Playing on sympathy for the Jewish people based on centuries of victimization of Jewish people, and based, I think, also on a affinity that comes out of Christian churches and Christians who are the dominant, cultural group in these countries that we live in. Um, Reading in the Bible about the Jews, and for example, knowing that Jesus was a Jew, and there are large Christian groups who believe that, the the return of Jesus depends on all the Jews returning to the Holy Land. I'm just saying there's much more to it than what you cited. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I think the choice of Israel as the kind of the one that holds the bully's coat in the Middle East is a completely irrational choice. And there's these other kind of non-rational, non-logical reasons why Israel's been able to capture the US and Canada and virtually every country in Europe, Australia. It's a long list. But go back to what you wanted to say, because I know you were leading to something, and
I I apologize. I don't remember quite what I was what I was going to
You
say.
said you put something on the screen, which I don't
Oh,
see.
yes. Sorry. I have a photo of you. It's the one that you sent me of you're on the Cannon House office building. This is a picture from the Washington Post. You've got your arm raised up in the air. It's a very powerful photo. So can you explain what is happening here and what the goal of it was and how you ended up and who you're organizing with?
Yeah, good. Thank you for that. So I'm a member of an organization in the US called Jewish Voice for Peace. I'm saying it slowly and clearly so everybody watching and listening can go find them, find their website, JVP, jewishvoiceforpeace.org. It's the largest Jewish anti-Zionist organization in the world. We have over 200,000 members. I'm a member, even though I live in Canada, and everyone else is welcome to become a member or a supporter. And it's an incredibly smart organization with lots of experience. And our staff and volunteers know that we, as we said it in the beginning of this program right now, we have a special responsibility and a special ability to affect the public discourse around Israel. And this is a moment where we need to pull out all stops and do everything we can. And they know how to get into the media. They know, how to use our voice. So honestly, I got a call from a rabbi who I went to seminary with on Monday, calling me from Chicago. His name is Rabbi Brant Rosen. I'm here in Hamilton, Ontario. He called me on Monday, and David, we're going to do this thing in Washington on Wednesday. Would you come? And I don't need any other explanation or details. I actually wrote to my rabbi's connection group with all humility. This is like God calling on Abraham and saying, go forth to the land that I will show you. And Abraham didn't know anything more than that. But if God's given the call, he's getting up and going. That's how I felt when I got a call from my colleague in Jewish Voice in Peace. It's like, okay, I'll buy a ticket to Washington, D.C. I'll be there Tuesday night, and then I'll find out what are we doing. And that's what we did. And they organized over 500 of us to clandestinely enter the Cannon House office building, wander the halls for a while, look at the artwork, go to some congressional offices because we want to talk about the farm bill. Yeah, we synchronize our watches. We all went to that rotunda, and we rabbis were in the middle, and we knew what was going on. This was planned meticulously. And I think there was an element of divine providence because this all took place on the day when the members of Congress themselves were voting over and over again on who would be the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, I've been following a little bit of that.
Right? So, like, every media in the world had their reporters and their cameramen, camera persons in the rotunda on the second floor. We knew this, and their cameras were there. And we showed up wearing shirts like this that are opaque, but underneath black t-shirts that said, Jews say ceasefire now. And we had banners, and I'm telling you, we were so coordinated. And at a certain moment, we took off our shirts, like Clark Kent in the phone booth, revealed who we are and why we're there. There were 500 of us there, banners out. We knew, face those banners up. So the cameras from CNN, MSNBC, everybody, ABC, NBC, Al Jazeera, they got it. They got it, and our goal was to reach the widest audience we could, and we totally did that. It's like wall-to-wall coverage, New York Times, Washington Post, everybody, even Aaron Clements. And while we were doing that, there was over 3,000 of outside in Independence Avenue, which is the big street that runs across Capitol Hill, blocking it. And the Capitol Police had to deal with us. Honestly, it took them hours, and inside and outside, and we got a lot of attention. Yeah, so that's what we did. I feel like the attention that we got, just say it contributes to shifting that narrative, as I was saying earlier. The discourse, like somehow Israel's doing this for the Jewish people, or somehow like members of Congress that are voting to send like more and more and more and more weapons are doing this to protect the Jews, or whatever that lie is. I feel like we like made a big hit against that. And of course, I just saw a thing right before you started this up, Aaron. The Anti-Defamation League is saying we are anti-Semitic.
Yep.
The Anti-Defamation League is saying that we, 25 rabbis and more than 3,000 other Jews, we're anti-Semitic because we're anti-Zionist.
That's right. And it all goes back to that tying of the Jewish identity to the nation of Israel. And this is what we're pushing back against. This really feels like there is a certain aura in the air. I'm old enough to remember the post 9/11 craze. There was almost no resistance where the West invaded two countries that had nothing to do with it. Afghanistan and Iraq.
Your analogy came to me immediately at on Saturday, October 7th,
yeah.
When Hamas did this gruesome, brutal, horrible attack, which I have to say is like not to be unexpected that they would try to do a thing like that. Of course, it's horrible what they did, but to think that they wouldn't try is just like bizarre.
Yeah.
So anyway, when that happened, I thought like, oh my God, it's
blowback
very,
to
very similar. And you said there was no resistance. There was plenty of resistance, but there wasn't enough. There was millions of people demonstrating in the streets. There's like we knew it. the Bush administration was going to do. We did everything we could to oppose it, but we couldn't stop it.
I just remember the movement to stop the war in Iraq, but after like weeks after 9/11, the invasion of Afghanistan was almost unopposed. There was this bloodlust in the air, and it seems like in certain ways we've learned nothing from that. The Israeli government has no pause for reflection, saying, "Hey, maybe we should de-escalate of what's causing this." Right? Instead, they're just ramping up, just doing exactly what we've done for 20 years. It's just ramp up the bombings, the genocide, the cutting off water medicine, and just destroying an entire people. There's 45 families that have now been taken off of the Gazan registers. There is no next of kin. They're gone. These families are gone. And it's
happening as we speak.
It is
I asked you to hold on here for a moment before you started the camera and all that.
Yeah, sure.
So I could send $200 to a single mother of 6 who I've been helping for about 2 years, along with other people in Canada who send me money and I relay it to her. Because she had to flee her house with her 6 children and ran to her sister's house miles away on foot. And her house was destroyed. And then her sister's house was bombed. And now she and her sister and all their children are in Khan Yunis. And they don't have money. There is little food and little water. It's been cut off. Everybody knows that. But there is some. And if they have money, they can buy it, and so we use PayPal to send money to her. Anyway, you just talked about 45 families like totally wiped out.
Yeah.
But even if the whole family's not wiped out, so many people are getting horribly injured and maimed. There's no hospitals, as we just said. The water's. We can't even conceptualize it. And just to go back to what you were saying, I remember within hours of this attack, which itself was horrible, but on October 7th, Joe Biden is sending a U.S. Air Force task force across the Mediterranean, backed up by destroyers and everything else called, like, that just reminded me so much of 9/11. Yeah. So when you say we haven't learned, I would say the big world is still working on learning. And, we're going to run out of time here kind of soon. I'm just going to arrogate to myself, continuing to speak. So an analogy that I have in my mind all the time that totally motivates me for what I do is that when the Nazis took over and they were rampaging across Europe, people rallied against them, but it took an awful lot to stop. I'll say people like you and me in the streets weren't able to stop the Nazis. It took years. And I can credit the Soviet Red Army largely with doing that, while the American army literally waited for them to beat down the Nazis enough till it was safe for the Americans to land some people in Sicily, like the farthest they could get away, or in, Normandy, right? They didn't want to go right to Germany. They waited for the Russians to beat them up really bad before they even put any Americans on the European soil. But anyway, go back to what I was saying. What I want to say is I think sometimes we may not be able to stop the bombing and stop the genocide and stop the slaughter. We may not be able to stop it. I don't know. We try. We keep trying. That is what you see me doing. I know so many stories of regular people living during those times who helped individual Jews or Jewish families. Stories of, let's just say, a Polish housewife walking past the Warsaw Ghetto and just takes a loaf of bread and heaves it over the wall. Somebody on the other side could get a loaf of bread and eat. right? And there's so many stories of like somehow they figured out how to pass a baby out, like literally through a sewer and up a manhole, and somebody could like take that baby and run off and raise the baby. And I've met those babies, like 70 years later. People older than me, obviously. I'm making a point about what motivated me. Last time I was in Palestine, I was standing literally arm in arm with Palestinians, using myself as a human shield, when they're being attacked by insane settlers and Israeli military. I was there like trying, to help them hold on to their land. I don't know how to overcome the power that's doing that. But I realized right then and there, if I could send them $50, they can feed their children that day, right? Or if I send them $25, you know what I'm saying? They could buy water. They don't even have water. I'm talking about communities in the West Bank. I'm not even talking about Gaza. And as time went by, I did that, and I started hearing from people in Gaza. Literally, I'm talking about years ago. They couldn't feed their children. So I started getting money from other people and sending money to people there. It helps them so much, pay for school fees, buy medicine, all these normal things that people need that they couldn't access. And nowadays, I mean, I know all the time, they could just be killed. I helped a 12-year-old woman who was a mother and was pregnant, and her husband was like completely disabled. I helped her get her diploma from Al-Azhar University in Gaza. I'm not boasting about myself. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't need to tell anybody. I raised $3,000 so she could pay off her tuition in order to get her diploma. And I know at the same time that she could be killed the next day. Her house was bombed. She right now is like in the street with her 2 kids. I fear the worst. But at the same time, I feel like if I can do anything to help her feed her kids and get through, either she'll live or she won't live. I can't stop those bombs. But I'm just saying to everybody listening to this, there's a political level, and I don't mean to totally detach these things. They're not opposed to each other in any way. There's a political level in which we need to keep struggling and be as smart and as powerful as we can be. And there's also a human level on which we can intervene and just help people. It's possible. Okay, I'll leave it at that. That was my sermon for the day.
You just give me goosebumps, David. You need to get going. David Mivasair, activist, and one of the strongest community leaders I've ever met. Thank you so much for joining.
Okay. Before I go, I just want to tell people there's so many ways to help. If you need to know, ask Aaron how to get in touch with me, and I can tell you there's so many good organizations, and there are ways to get financial help to people on the ground that need it. And seriously, even finding people in Gaza on Facebook and writing to them, even if you can't do anything concrete, if you just say to them, I know you're there. I'm thinking of you. I'm praying for you, whatever. That just like people are almost like desperate to know that somebody in the rest of the world knows that they're still there. So just there's so many ways to help. That's
today's stream is a charity stream, and we're raising money for Doctors Without Borders because totally. There's a lot of people who friends of mine have had their jobs threatened because they have criticized Israel and they stand in solidarity with Palestinians. Doctors Without Borders is one of the safer ones, and they're on the ground in Gaza right now.
That's right.
Helping people. There's hospital workers drinking IV fluid because they're out of water. It's the insanity is incredible, but at the same time, the humanity is also absolutely astounding. I'll relay before you go. There's a story I read online. I wanted to relay to you. I read about 2 Palestinian men who were arguing over a loaf of bread. Well, what they were arguing about was the one neighbor was trying to give it to his friend, arguing with him, trying to get him to take this loaf of bread to help feed his family. and the other guy refused to take it because he couldn't afford to pay him for it. That's the people we're trying to save. That's the humanity that's on the ground in Gaza right now. And that's something that's absolutely worth fighting for. David, thank you so much for coming by.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was David Mivasair. I could have gone on for another half hour. Honestly, he had lots to say. I had a lot to say. I think this story of genocide and apartheid, we know this story here in Canada. This nation is built on the graves of Indigenous children, much like the nation of Israel is built on the graves of Palestinian children. And I didn't even get to what I wanted to talk about as well. We wanted to talk about what's happening with our local member of provincial parliament, Sarah Jama, who made the correct assessment, talking about colonialism, talking about genocide. She is calling for an end to the occupation of Palestinian land and an end to apartheid. And Canada must hold true to its history of peacemaking and refrain from military intervention. Well, I don't know. This is a country of genocide as well. My heart genuinely goes out to all those impacted by this ongoing violence. And she got absolutely thrown under the bus for this. Her own leadership called her out on this. Doug Ford is calling for her to resign. It's absolute bullshit. And I had the honor and pleasure of meeting her last Saturday. I had a minute with her and said, everything you said here is correct. And your constituents have your back. And I don't want you to back down because, frankly, fuck these people. You are right. And she's consistently been thrown under the bus by her own party. It's insane. I also didn't get a chance to ask, like, what can Canadians do? But for now, I think all we can do as a nation who knows the story of apartheid and genocide, donate to Doctors Without Borders. That's a politically safe organization. Hopefully you won't attract too much flack from your employer if they find out you're donating to it. Please donate to that. The link will be at the bottom of the YouTube channel, so look for that. And thank you for stopping by, folks.